How much do you think that this costs at the grocery store? How much do you think I just had to pay for this box of giant-sized Cheerios?
The backlash from the skyrocketing cost of breakfast cereals. One of the top cereal makers admitting Americans are fed up with the higher prices and are not buying as much.
General Mills just dropped a $70 million bombshell, and it wasn't to grow, it was to cut. In June 2025, the American food giant quietly filed a sweeping restructuring plan, revealing that the entire budget was set aside for layoffs and severance, not expansion. No new factories, no product launches, just retreat. This wasn't spin. It was a strategic withdrawal from U.S. operations targeting core facilities and longtime workers. In total, the restructuring package signals a $130 million shift, with most of the pain landing squarely on American jobs. Why now? Because even legacy brands like General Mills see the writing on the wall. Production is moving elsewhere. Costs are rising at home, and international markets are offering smoother pathways.
Now, General Mills is a company that absolutely deserves to feel the pressure of the people. They have engaged in unethical farming practices, price gouging, and they are literally pumping chemical-laced, low-nutrition products into the homes of millions.
This isn't just a corporate decision, it's a warning shot for the U.S. economy. By the start of summer 2025, something felt off in grocery stores across the U.S. Shelves that once overflowed with colorful cereal boxes began to look unusually bare. In places like Iowa, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, confused shoppers took to TikTok and Instagram posting under the hashtag #WhereAreTheCheerios. Videos showed entire aisles stripped clean with handwritten signs that read, "Limit 2 boxes per customer." What started as mild curiosity quickly turned into public concern. Retailers pointed to vague explanations, shipping delays, inventory reset, supply chain hiccups. But the reality was more unsettling. Just weeks earlier, General Mills had filed a sweeping restructuring plan that included massive production cuts, discontinued SKUs, and $70 million earmarked for severance payouts. This wasn't a temporary glitch. It was a deliberate step back from full-scale U.S. operations, and now it was playing out in real time on the breakfast aisle. Parents looking for familiar cereals couldn't find them. Kids asked why their favorite box was gone. And quietly, a deeper message took hold: the system is shifting, and companies aren't saying much. When iconic brands go quiet, when they remove products without warning, it creates more than just inconvenience. It creates doubt.
Prior to the inflationary period and the interest rate increases that came on the back of it, we were in an almost zero interest environment where, as a strategic buyer of assets, we were often finding that it was hard to compete on price.
And as the shelves stayed empty and explanations ran dry, Americans were left to wonder if Cheerios can vanish without warning what's next. To millions of American families, the cereal shortage felt sudden and confusing. But inside the Minneapolis headquarters of General Mills, the decision had been in motion for nearly 2 years. Internally, it wasn't called a crisis. It was referred to as planned deprioritization. That corporate speak masked a deeper truth: the company was intentionally scaling down its presence in the U.S. market. Starting as early as mid-2023, General Mills quietly began phasing out production lines tied to legacy brands, not just niche offerings but household staples like Frosted Mini Wheats, and even seasonal favorites like limited edition Lucky Charms. These weren't temporary suspensions or product redesigns, they were permanent wind-downs. And while American consumers were kept in the dark, the company's financial filings began to tell a different story. At the same time, capital investment began shifting abroad. Instead of upgrading domestic facilities or expanding distribution in the U.S., General Mills directed funds toward growth markets overseas. Latin America and Southeast Asia received new production capacity. Marketing budgets in Europe rose, and behind closed doors, key executives with full visibility into these strategic shifts began selling off large portions of their company stock. By the time the public caught wind of the layoffs and shortages in 2025, insiders had already cashed out. This was not about a cereal brand struggling with inflation or grain prices. It was about a multinational conglomerate realigning its business away from what it now viewed as a low-growth, high-risk market, the United States. U.S. grocery chains known for demanding razor-thin margins and unpredictable purchasing cycles had simply become less appealing than foreign buyers who offered consistency and scale. And while General Mills avoided dramatic announcements, the signs were clear to anyone paying close attention. The exit wasn't loud, it was quiet, strategic, and surgical. Product by product, line by line, the company hollowed out its domestic footprint while keeping up appearances.
General Mills is selling its yogurt business in a deal worth more than $2 billion. The deal includes brands like Yoplait, Liberty, and Go-Gurt. In the fiscal year 2024, General Mills' yogurt business contributed about $1.5 billion in net sales.
What remained was the illusion of normalcy until the shelves finally emptied, and Americans realized the world's most famous cereal brands had already left the building. What looked like empty cereal shelves and shrinking product lines in the U.S. was, in fact, just the surface ripple of a much bigger shift. By mid-2025, General Mills had clearly begun steering its entire business away from its domestic roots and into global waters. The clearest signal came in June when the company sold off its U.S. yogurt division in a $2 billion deal to French dairy giant Lactalis. This wasn't just about trimming fat, it was about offloading what General Mills no longer considered core to its future. Behind that move was a massive reallocation of capital. In the company's latest earnings reports, capital expenditure in North America had dropped off a cliff. Meanwhile, new manufacturing sites were springing up across emerging markets Mexico, Vietnam, India, and Brazil. These weren't experimental ventures. They were the new focus where growth was strong, labor was cheaper, and regulation was more forgiving. Even product labeling told the story. General Mills began quietly removing U.S.-specific artificial color warnings from its branding, claiming it was part of a global harmonization strategy. But the reality was, starker American regulatory quirks and shifting consumer preferences had simply become too much of a headache. Easier to optimize packaging and supply for markets that didn't shift their rules every election cycle. This wasn't a supply glitch. It was a signal. A signal that the U.S., once the company's most prized and stable market, was now too costly, too complicated, and too volatile to remain the center of gravity. While American consumers hunted down missing boxes of cereal, General Mills had already packed its bags. Behind every corporate restructuring line item is a human toll, and in the case of General Mills, the fallout was devastating. More than 700 workers in Iowa alone lost their jobs as part of the cereal giant's quiet retreat. Many were given little more than a generic pamphlet and a handshake, no meaningful severance, no transition support, just a hard stop to decades of labor. In small towns where the company had been a pillar of stability, that sudden collapse sent shockwaves through entire communities. The impact stretched far beyond the factory gates. Across school districts, Morning Foods, the cereal division responsible for breakfast staples like Cheerios and Lucky Charms, was removed from lunch programs. Local grocery stores began replacing familiar brands with cheaper, smaller vendors that couldn't keep up with demand. Shelves sat half-stocked or completely bare. Parents who once trusted these products to feed their kids had to scramble for alternatives. Then came the trust breaker. Earlier in 2025, the FDA published findings of trace glyphosate, a controversial weed killer in multiple cereal products. The timing couldn't have been worse. Already reeling from layoffs and empty shelves, families now faced a new fear: was the cereal they did manage to find even safe? The betrayal cut deep. While workers lined up for unemployment and school kids ate low-quality substitutes, General Mills executives posted record bonuses. Communities weren't just losing jobs, they were losing faith in a company that had once been woven into the fabric of American life. To the boardroom, this wasn't retreat, it was optimization. General Mills didn't just cut jobs, it restructured its entire portfolio to chase higher-margin global markets. The $70 million set aside for U.S. layoffs wasn't an accident. It was a calculated shift to free up capital that's now fueling growth in Brazil, Vietnam, and India. In corporate terms, this is called reallocation. On the ground, it looked like empty parking lots and silent production lines. The yogurt business sale to France's Lactalis unlocked a chunk of cash that General Mills is now pouring into more promising sectors like pet food and international snack lines. These are categories with rising demand, better margins, and fewer political risks than the U.S. breakfast aisle. In places like Southeast Asia and Latin America, snack sales are booming. In contrast, the American cereal bowl is facing shrinking interest and growing controversy. And then there's consumer perception. Removing artificial colors from labels wasn't just a branding update, it was a global repositioning. Consumers abroad, especially in Europe and parts of Asia, demand cleaner ingredients and tighter transparency. U.S. regulatory unpredictability made it harder to deliver on those promises domestically. Abroad, the playbook is simpler, the margins higher, and the oversight more stable. So yes, the pivot made business sense. But while General Mills gained market share overseas, what it left behind was more than a factory floor. It left behind trust, tradition, and thousands of American families wondering if breakfast will ever feel the same again. General Mills' retreat from the U.S. isn't just about cereal. It's a sign of something deeper, something systemic. For decades, American food giants built their brands on hometown loyalty, national pride, and dependable local production. But now in boardrooms far from the factory floor, a different logic is taking over global efficiency over domestic stability. The restructuring isn't a glitch, it's a blueprint. And if General Mills can quietly pull out of Midwestern plants after 150 years, what's stopping the rest? From yogurt lines shifting to France to investment flowing into Mexico and Vietnam, the pattern is clear. The U.S. is becoming too slow, too expensive, and too unpredictable for multinationals chasing streamlined profits. Regulatory pressure, labor demands, and rising costs are making American soil less attractive for food manufacturing. And as global players pivot away, our shelves are left with fewer choices, and our communities with fewer jobs. This isn't about supply chain optimization, it's about control. When school cafeterias can't count on domestic cereal shipments, and when grocery stores in Des Moines or Scranton start sourcing staples from Sao Paulo or Delhi, we have to ask who's actually feeding America and what happens when that system breaks. If you're shocked, you're not alone. The cost isn't just in the checkout line, it's in lost paychecks, canceled school meals, and broken public trust. This isn't just about food, it's about sovereignty. The road back starts now, policy that puts homegrown production first, investment in stable supply chains, and a new definition of national resilience, one that begins with breakfast. Because if we can't make cereal in America anymore, what exactly can we make?